The radio is one of the outstanding developments of the 20th century. With modern radio sending and receiving equipment, it is possible to establish communication instantaneously from any place at any time.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of the internet? How are you guys doing? Today on this video, we're gonna take a look at SRAM's brand new Force eTap component system on my new bike. And it is a slightly more affordable alternative to SRAM's top of the line component set. That's the Red Axis component set. So in this video, we're gonna talk about all the details of this 2x12 system. We're gonna talk about what some of the key differences are when you do spend a little less money on this component set, and I'll give you my overall impressions of this wireless bike component set after having used it and ridden on it for about 2 weeks. And real quickly, I just want to say that SRAM is not sponsoring this video in any way, shape, form, or fashion. They didn't send me these components to review. I actually bought these components with my own money from the Dialed Cycling Lab, and I'll leave a link to them below in the description of this video if you guys want to check that out. And I went with the 4835 on the front chainring and the 1033 on the rear cassette. And that's just because there are a lot of hills in the area where I bike, and so I do tend to do a lot of climbing. Now, this entire group set weighs about 2,812 grams, and I'm also using the Quarq AXS power meter with this bike. Let me know if you guys want me to review that power meter just in the comments below, and I'll get on that when I have time. Now, the SRAM AXS component set comes in either a 1x12 or a 2x12 configuration, meaning that you have 2 chains up front and 12 chain rings in the back in that rear cassette. And you might be on like a 9 or a 10 speed, or a lot of you guys might have moved on to the 11 speed cassettes, and that's what SRAM had been using up until this point. And that's also the current offering from a company like Shimano. I'd say Shimano is probably the market leader when it comes to bike components, but there are other bike component companies. There's CAMPAGNOLO, and they have a component set called the Chorus 12 speed component set, similar to this. And there's also Rotor, which actually makes a 13 speed group set. So having extra gear options just gives you that greater range for climbing or descending, or having smaller jumps in between your shifting, so you can kind of find that Goldilocks gear ratio. And this bike does require a slightly different free hub. They have a new system called their XDR free hub. So all of your wheel sets are potentially not compatible with this group set until you've switched out that free hub. And the 2 derailleur shifters are powered by 2 batteries that kind of pop out of the back of the derailleurs, and they pop into their charger. So what's nice is if your battery does happen to die while you're out on the road biking, it's not too hard to just shift one battery from the front to the back, just so that you can kind of continue to shift and make your way home. And SRAM claims that you'll get about 20 hours of ride time per battery. And I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't actually tested that out, and I haven't had a situation where I've had a battery die on me yet. But you can connect your smartphone to the actual components of this bike, and you can actually check. There's a small battery icon that'll give you an idea of how much battery you have left. And there's also a coin cell style battery that's in the shifters themselves. They shouldn't need to be replaced as frequently. From what I've read, they're saying once every 2 years or so. But again, that's gonna depend on how much you're actually biking and how much you're shifting within your bike rides. Okay, so if you hop on this component set for the first time, one of the first things that you're gonna notice is that the shifting is completely different. It's different than anything that I've ever ridden before. And it might take you a ride or two just to kind of get used to it. But to shift the rear derailleur, all you do is you either push the left shifter to shift up the cassette or the right lever to shift down the cassette. So right would be harder gearing and left would be shifting up for easier gearing. And it does feel pretty intuitive after using it, really even for just one ride. And to shift the front derailleur, all you do is press both of the shift levers together at the same time. Now you can customize some of this shifting logic, but it's not really something that I've played around with. I did take a look at it within the application itself, but it's just not something that I think would be intuitive if you had it set opposite. And if you've ever used electronic shifting before, I would say it's a real treat. The shifting just feels really quick and really precise, and it's just so easy and effortless. And I have been having one issue, and that's where the front derailleur just seems to be pushing my chain off the front ring, kind of to the outside of the chain ring, almost losing the chain. But I am fairly confident that I can continue to kind of dial in that front derailleur and kind of fix that front shifting issue. Okay, one of the things I love most about this component set is how easy it is to set up on a new bike. Wireless shifting means that you don't have to run a cable through the frame of your bike. There are no junction boxes. There's no hidden battery in your seat post. And when we talk about bikes all the time on this channel, we're often talking about triathlon bikes or TT bikes. And in my experience, it can be a real nightmare to work on those bikes. And I think that there's a lot of value in using a system like this, something that's just not overly engineered. TT bikes just have a really rough reputation for having difficult bikes to wrench on and having to run shifting cables around impossible curves and turns. And the electronic shifting allows TT bikes to be able to shift both from the TT bars as well as the brake hoods, which is fantastic. So having a wireless setup just makes it one less thing that you have to worry about when you're installing these components, whether that's on a road bike or a TT bike. And I chose to not go with the 1x system on my road bike, but I definitely appreciate that whether you have the red or the SRAM force group set, that you can run a 1x system. And it's definitely something that I would consider if I was choosing it for my time trial bike. And I love the fact that the force component set has this very muted black finish. It has like a black metal cage for the derailleur. It has a black rear cassette, even black springs within the cassette, and the adjustment bolts are black. I really love the look of this. And I think a lot of dirt and road grime will just kind of show up less on these components. In SRAM's top of the line component set, the red AXS has a little bit more of a chrome look to it, which I get some people will be into that. But for me personally, I just actually prefer the way that this force looks. I also prefer the lower price of this particular component set compared to the red. And mostly what you're getting for that price difference is a significant reduction in weight. Basically, it costs more to manufacture lighter weight components. Most of the parts have to be hollowed out, and it's a bit more difficult to manufacture those parts. For example, the red chain itself is about 8 grams lighter than the force chain. In that red chain, they actually use hollowed out pins instead of solid pins. The rear cassette is about 50 grams lighter on the red. And again, that's just gonna depend on which cassettes you're comparing. So when you do add everything up, the force components end up being about 200 to 300 grams heavier than the red component sets. And this component set is probably ever so slightly heavier than the Ultegra Di2 equivalent. Again, Ultegra is kind of the most comparable component set coming from Shimano. And it's definitely hard to compare because there's so many different options and configurations. But we're talking somewhere between 100 and 200 grams heavier than that Ultegra set. So not a huge deal to me, you know, but it's definitely one of those differences that you're gonna wanna bring up when you're kind of comparing these different component sets. I thought actually of like having me drink a beer and maybe like eat some chicken wings while I talk about the component weights, but I didn't get around to making that happen. I will also say that Shimano has these little built-in buttons on their electronic shifters that allow you to control things like your bike lights or even the screens on your computer. It's not something that is a must-have, but it's definitely something that would be nice if SRAM offered that or something similar. And I have an older version of the Shimano Di2 on my TT bike, and I would say for the most part, the shifting feels super similar, but I probably would say that the Ultegra front shifting might feel a little bit snappier to me, maybe a little bit faster. It's definitely not a deal breaker, but it's just something subtle that I've noticed over the past 2 weeks. And because the SRAM AXS components are wireless, they do tend to be a little bit bigger, and that's because, you know, they have batteries, and it just tends to take up a little bit more space. I also don't love some of the proprietary parts that are required to use this component set. You actually need a new bottom bracket called their Dub bottom bracket, which is a great bottom bracket, and I'm glad that you'll be able to use this bottom bracket going forward with all the different SRAM components, but it is another piece that you'll need to buy. And another proprietary part that I was talking about earlier is that XDR free hub. And I'll just say it was nice when you could swap out your rear cassette from Shimano to SRAM, you know, with that same standard free hub piece. No problems there. You know, you still can use the same tools to switch stuff out, but you will need that special free hub for this component set. And for me, I know that might mean switching out the free hub on my Smart Trainer. And lastly, while this component set is definitely not the most expensive component set on the market, you know, it's marketed as kind of the cheaper alternative to the Red, I do still think that is a very expensive product. And it's hard to say the exact prices of all of these different components. They're all sold separately, but realistically, I'm seeing prices online for, you know, just under $2,000. And again, this all depends on what parts you need, but I'm expecting that you're gonna need all of these different parts. So that's like that XDR free hub, the Dub bottom bracket, lots of little things like the proprietary USB SRAM battery charger, and those costs, they just add up. And comparable component sets like the Ultegra 11 speed component set that I was talking about earlier, yes, it's a little bit older, and so you can often find slightly better prices on that. So I think you could save maybe $200 to $300 by going with a different component set like that one. But again, that's not really fair. We're not really comparing like apples to apples here. This is a 12-speed wireless group set, and overall, I'm super pleased with it so far. Since picking up this bike, I've basically been going out and riding every single day. It helps that we've had great weather, but I've been getting a fair amount of miles in, and I really don't have a lot of complaints about the component set. So if you're like me and you're into swimming, running, or biking, be sure to subscribe to this channel and make sure that you change that little notification bell down there to all, just so you'll be able to be notified of whenever I post new videos, which is typically about once per week. And as always, I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch these videos, and we will see you guys on the next one.